So why do we actually need forms in SharePoint? Well, SharePoint and SharePoint lists are a great tool for managing and storing business information. They are very extensible, they're very easy to use, and they're in web format that is very useful and for any common use. The problem is that the built-in forms for SharePoint lists are quite basic, and they're not really suitable for advanced business solutions. So for any real-life applications, we'll need to use something more powerful. So one option is using InfoPath Forms. InfoPath is basically an XML-based form generator and filler. So it's a standalone application similar to Word or Excel that you need to install on your computer, but it integrates with SharePoint to provide a form solution for SharePoint. But it's by no means a native SharePoint solution. It will look different and it will behave different from the regular SharePoint built-in forms. Now, InfoPath can also integrate in SharePoint by automatically converting the InfoPath created forms into HTML-based forms that you can view in your browser. For that, you will need the form services, which is part of the SharePoint Enterprise Edition, and you will also need client access licenses or CALs. And as all of you already know, Microsoft has announced that InfoPath is not going to be developed any longer, and it's been retired, and there'll be no more new versions. So basically, we're talking about outgoing technology. Now, in terms of forms that you can create with InfoPath in SharePoint, there are basically two different types of forms that you can leverage. First of all, you can replace the built-in SharePoint forms with their InfoPath-based counterparts. And they basically replace the forms, they still submit to the same list item, they add more functionality compared to the regular SharePoint forms, such as more advanced validation rules or more control over the layout of the form, but it's still very limited in terms of functionality. Now, if we talk about the second option, that would be using forms libraries, which are a special type of document libraries where you can store the XML content file of what the InfoPath will produce. So basically, all the values of the fields that you fill in will be stored in a special XML format. This is not a native solution for SharePoint. It does not become a SharePoint item. It's more like a, again, document library. It offers more extended functionality, and we will cover that during our session today, and it gives you more control over the layout and the data structure. So let's just show you. I don't want to just talk about the things. I also want to show you. So basically, I have here a purchase order that was developed using InfoPath as forms and InfoPath as a forms library. So this is a regular list. If I click on an item, you will see that instead of the regular SharePoint form, we have some designed form that looks and feels a little bit different from the built-in form, but it still saves to the same list. Now, if we go to this document library, this forms library, this is a purchase order library, and you can see that there is a file, the XML file that holds the information. You can click on it, and again opens up using the form services. It opens up in your browser, but you see that it's a more advanced form, and we will cover the differences as we go along. Okay, next. So what about InfoPath Ultimate Forms? What is InfoPath Ultimate Forms? We're talking about a complete code-free platform for building business applications inside your SharePoint. It's an extremely rich set of components. There are up to 18 individual components depending on the edition. It works on all versions of SharePoint. Bear in mind that to use InfoPath Forms with form services, you would need the enterprise license. Here we're talking about anything including the SharePoint Foundation, which is basically free. And it provides a lot more than just forms. It provides you with tools that you can use for reporting, for implementing business logic, for integrating with external applications, and so on. Okay, so let's jump right into the comparison itself. So first of all, let's talk about the design and the integration. So basically, how the tool integrates with SharePoint and how we use it to design our forms. So let's talk about InfoPath first. In terms of the design environment, we're talking about a standalone application, so you need to install it on the machine where you want to author your forms. On the other hand, our Ultimate Forms integrates into SharePoint itself. It's accessible anywhere, anywhere you can connect to your SharePoint. In terms of integration, InfoPath, again, as we saw, it's a non-native UI and non-native functionality, so it's going to look different, and your user is going to notice that. Ultimate Forms is 100% integrated. It gives you a solution that looks exactly like any other SharePoint solution. And in terms of the SharePoint license, again, InfoPath requires you, again, for the form services, it requires you to use the enterprise license, which is the most expensive one, whereas Ultimate Forms can run even on the free version. So let's just look at how it looks in terms of design. So for InfoPath, we will use this tool. This is the designer for InfoPath. So basically we create the data structure and then we just drag them and the columns on the design surface, and then we just publish it into SharePoint. On the other hand, with Ultimate Forms, we just go to a list and then we click on the list ribbon, and there's a design button that we can use to access all the features, and there's also help and blogs and everything here. So we do everything within our site, within our browser. Okay, great. Okay, so let's talk about the features. So first feature that we want to talk about is layout. So how we can define, how we can customize, how we can extend the layout of our form. This is one of the most common requirements, is to make to change the layout of the form to make it look better or function better. So in InfoPath, we have the concept of sections. We can subdivide it. So basically, we're creating our own layout table with their sections, and we use drag and drop to define how our form looks like. In my personal opinion, drag and drop sometimes actually takes longer to work with. It is more difficult to work with than the approach that we use in Ultimate Forms, which is defining tabs, assigning permissions to these tabs, defining sections, groups, and we also support multi-column layout. So we can basically lay out, put our list columns into vertical columns, more than one. By default, in SharePoint you will have one. We can have as much as 3. In terms of look and feel, again, in InfoPath we use the designer, and we can change colors of the background and fonts and so on. In Ultimate Forms, we use a configuration-based design for the common things like background color or borders and so on. And we also have full CSS support as well, so we can add our custom CSS classes as well. In terms of how it looks within our SharePoint, InfoPath, as we saw it, it looks kind of foreign. It's distinct from the other sides, whereas Ultimate Forms will have 100% native look. So let's take a look at that again. So we saw this is the InfoPath form, and you saw the sections here. So basically the design is up to you, because you design in the layout table. In Ultimate Forms, so let's take, for example, a leads list. So it's a context list, regular built-in context list, but we've extended it to look a little bit differently. Well, a lot differently, actually. So we have this, first of all, you notice the tabbed interface. So we subdivided the long list of columns into meaningful sections by topic, so main details, contact details, and the address. Let's just maybe increase a bit. We have the title up here with a little graphic as well. You can see that our columns are now in two distinct layout columns, left and right. Our column labels are above the fields instead of being to the opposite of the field itself. And if we have also a section here with its own header. If we go and edit this form now, we can see that the design continues on here as well, and even the description of the field, instead of being under the field, it's now a little pop-up, so it's out of the way. So basically we can see that we can have a lot of control. We control the background colors, we control the tab, we control everything, and it was all done using simple configurations. Okay, let's talk about permissions, and now I'm talking about in-item permissions, or column permissions and such. So first of all, in terms of tabs, a tabbed interface, and we already touched that a little bit, but tabbed interface is a really useful interface because it can put more information on a limited screen, and it can group the information by topic. So in InfoPath, you usually will do sections or groups. If you want to implement tabs, you can still implement tabs, but you would have to use views for that. So basically, you would need to define multiple views. So redesign the whole page again and again for multiple views, and then have buttons that will change those views. A little bit awkward, a little bit hard to do. With Ultimate Forms, what we do, we basically define the tabs and the groups directly from within the list settings. So it's really easy to do, and we can even subdivide those tabs and groups into subsections, and I will show you in a second. Now we can also attach permissions directly to those tabs. In Ultimate Forms, we can have permissions. A tab can be writable, read-only, or hidden through the use of conditions and based on who the current user is and what groups he belongs to. In InfoPath, you can define the rules, but they are based on specific columns, and you can only compare it to other field values. The same goes for column permissions. We also support column permissions directly for specific columns, and that would override the tab permissions if we had any. In InfoPath, it's the same as before because they only have column permissions. Another very important thing that InfoPath does not have and Ultimate Source does have is the ability to control the visibility of list views themselves. So for instance, you've hidden a column from a form, but now it's visible in a view, so not much of a point there. In InfoPath, you cannot do. InfoPath only controls forms. With Ultimate Forms, you can control view permissions as well, so we can have one view for restricted users and one view for other users, and so on. So let's just see how we can do something like that. So let's continue with this leads list. So just go to the design button and go to tabs and tab permissions. And you can see here that we have our tabs right here. We can control which columns belong to which tab by simply selecting the column here and just double clicking it, and it will be added to this particular tab. We can also have the sections here, and you see the section was added here. And in this list we did not do that, but we can also easily add permissions. Let's just see a list that does have permissions, and this is a purchase order list. So for instance, if I create a new purchase order, I only see one tab for the purchase order details. When I go and I want to approve an existing purchase order, I can now see two tabs, one with the purchase order details, which is now in read-only mode, and the approval tab, which is in read-write mode. So I can control the mode, and I can also control the visibility of the tab based on who the user is. For instance, this approval is only open to a specific group of people. Now I can also do permissions dynamically, meaning when I change something, and the second I change something, the permission rules are applied. For instance, I have this list of insurances. Now I have car insurance and I have house insurance. So by selecting the type of insurance that I want, the correct tab is displayed right here. So I can say I want home insurance, so I have home details here, or I want a vehicle insurance and I would have vehicle details right here. So basically the permissions are dynamically applied the second I change one of the values that participate in the conditions for those permissions. Okay, let's talk about the data structure. So basically where and how the information is stored. So as I was saying, in InfoPath, in most cases you would want to use the XML-based forms library because it gives you a lot more features. So there's an XML file, and in SharePoint, because of the integration with InfoPath, knows to open it in the correct template. In correct InfoPath template converts it into HTML. In Ultimate Forms, it's completely list-based, so it's completely integrated into your SharePoint environment. So for instance, in Forms libraries, you can promote a field from XML. Not all of them, just some of them. You can promote it to be displayed as a field in your list as well, in your document library as well, but it's a limited field. You cannot change it. You cannot control any of its settings. Another common requirement, and we already saw an implementation of that, but I'm going to talk about it now, is the repeating sections. Now, repeating sections allow you to do something like the purchase order that we just saw, where you would have a purchase order and you would have multiple lines within that purchase order. Well, in InfoPath, you can only do it if you base it on a Forms library, so you cannot do it in a simple list. In the Forms library, it's just mapped to a section in your XML, but it does not map to anything that SharePoint can recognize. So you'd have to, it's not visible in any views. You have to open up the form to be able to see these repeating sections. Now in Ultimate Forms, it's actually implemented as a related list. So you see it both in Forms and views, and we're talking about a real list with real items in it. So any life cycle of a SharePoint items that you want to implement can be implemented easily. Workflows, permissions, version control, whatever you like. Another thing that you want to use is the related item summary. For instance, you want to calculate the total of the purchase order. So InfoPath gives you summary functions, again within the forms themselves. So you need to open the form and change something, and then that would be recalculated. In Ultimate Forms, it's automatically calculated, subject to filters, and you don't need to open the form. Even if you, for example, I'll give you a good example. You have a project with related tasks, and you want to count the number of open tasks. So basically, you're only counting the task where the status is not completed. When you change something in a task, you can go directly to the task list, change the task, complete the task, it automatically calculates the new total. So you don't need to go and open up the project. So let's actually see that. So first of all, the purchase orders. First of all, you can see the related items directly from any view. So for example, this is the view of the purchase orders, but you can drill down into the related lines. So for instance, if I open it up, You can also see it from here. So I see it, and each of them is an item shown right. I have the full context menu. I can control each item, and I have this automatic calculation as well. In InfoPath, I can implement it in Forms, but again, it goes directly within the XML, so there's not a lot I can do beyond that. Next. Okay, column types. We're going to talk about which types of column in SharePoint you can actually support with this form solution. Now, InfoPath, as many of you already know, does not support some column types, such as a very useful managed metadata. Other types it supports either fully or with some modified or reduced functionality. So it will work differently from any other list, and again, your users will notice. In our case, because we basically extend existing forms, we do not replace them with new types of forms. We support all types of columns. What about custom column types? Something you bought from a vendor. Well, InfoPath obviously does not support any of that. We support all types of custom columns, and we also provide additional types ourselves, such as the associated items that we saw, cascading lookup, color choice, and so on and so forth. You can actually see it if you go and we design the form again and scroll down to the bottom. You can actually see all the types of the additional columns that we provide as part of Ultimate Forms. And we're going to cover some of them in more detail later on. Okay, let's talk about validations and default values. So in terms of default values, you can set obviously default values in InfoPath, but they are common to all users. It's always the same default values. Now in Ultimate Forms, you can set user-specific column default values. So for one group of users, you can have one default. For the other group of users, you can have a completely different default. You can also pass default values to URLs for more advanced scenarios, and you can also have content type specific default values if you have more than one content type in your list. Now, regarding validation rules, again, very important topic. In InfoPath, you can have validation rules subject to conditions, and you also have support for some pattern validations, such as emails and URLs. Not all patterns are supported. In Ultimate Forms, again, you can have validation rules subject to conditions, but also subject to who the user is and what group he belongs to. And you have full regular expression pattern support. We have specific cases for emails, phones, and so on, but we can also allow you to type in any regular expression that you want. Another very, very important capability is the ability to validate based on the related items that we saw. For instance, prevent me from closing a project where there are still open tasks for that project. It's not supported not in the same way in InfoPath, and we fully support that. So let's take a look at these capabilities. So first of all, let's start with the simple validation. We have a context list. We have a person here. So let's change his email address and a phone number to some invalid values. So I'm just going to type not valid and bad email. So both of them obviously cannot be validated correctly. When we click on it, we have the error message right here saying that you cannot validate. This is a simple validation. Let's talk about something more advanced. So let's switch to our projects list. And this list actually, for each project, we have multiple subtasks. So when we have open tasks and we actually have this associated items summary column to calculate it for us, Now if we try, now this project has 2 open tasks. So if I open it up and I try to close the project by switching the status to completed, click on it, and we get an error message. Let me just make it bigger for you. That's your message, that you define your message, that it cannot be completed because the tasks are still open. So you have a lot of control over how you want to validate your item. Okay, actions. Well, actions is a very, very big topic. We actually had a webinar dedicated to just actions. So what are actions? Actions are the business logic that you implement inside your form or in a greater business process that this form is a part of. So in InfoPath, you can use actions to set a field value. That's the only basically action that is available to you. In our case, we support 16 types of different actions, from updating, creating, deleting items in any list, in any site collection, basically. You can manage permissions for anything between an item to a whole site. You can create new sites and new lists. You can print and so on and so on. Now, when are these actions executed? So in InfoPath, when you change the value of one field, you can, for instance, run an action to set a value of another one. In our case, you can run when item is added, updated, deleted. It can run on a timer, for instance, 2 days before the due date of a task, or 1 year after the last modified of a document, or you can even run them manually by adding a ribbon button. Again, everything is done in configuration inside your browser. Let's see that. We're going to go back to our project list. And what are we going to do? We're going to create new project. So let's create a new project. Let's call it project test 7. Makes sense. Test 7. We'll start this project next week and finish it the week after. And what is going to happen when I click on save is these actions are going to be executed. We're not talking about workflows here. These actions respond to the item being created. Now, the first 2 actions actually create related items, related tasks. So basically, they're going to add tasks for this project. First one tells us to generate documentation, and the other one tells us to assign resources. We're going to also count these tasks with an action. We are going to create a team site for this project automatically under the current site, and we're going to link that site back to this project item. You don't see the URL field because it's hidden using column permissions, but it's there. So let me just click on save, and once I click on save, the actions start to work. So I think the actions that create the task have already completed, and you can see that by clicking on click for details of the tasks. So yes, we see the 2 tasks. Now if we refresh that, the list, we're going to see that the number of open tasks has been changed as well, and the project site has already been created as well. You can even see the actions, which actions have been completed and which have not, in this action history. So let's go just see that the site is there, and it should be there. Yeah, the site is perfectly created. So again, as I was saying, you can even complete the action from here, for instance, with a ribbon button, and you see that the number of open tasks is now 1, so it has calculated that as well. Just to show you how easy it is to configure something like that, we just again go to Design, Actions, and we have all of these actions here. For instance, this action that generates this task for generating documentation is basically we're setting some parameters, and it's really easy to do directly from here. No deployment, no tools required. Lookups. Cascading lookups, again, very common business need. You can implement that, again, in Forms library-based InfoPath, but it doesn't work very well. I'll show you the implementation. We support that with unlimited levels. Now, what happens if you want to select the value, but it's not there yet? For instance, you are filling in a purchase order, you're halfway there, you want to add a supplier, but the supplier is not in the list. So in SharePoint and in InfoPath, you would have to close it down, lose all of the information that you've entered, go to a different list, add the supplier there, and restart the purchase order. In our case, we can add items as you go on the fly without having to reload the form itself, and we can also provide you with the ability to filter values when there are many values, so it will be easier to select one. So let's just see it again. Let's start with InfoPath in this case. So for example, here, when I change the supplier, the list of contacts has changed as well, but for some reason it still keeps the old value that was selected, but only the ID. Don't know why, but it does that. So this is the only legal one. If we go here and we go to purchase orders, new item, so you can select one, and then you can, it automatically selects the first one because it's a required field. You can add new one both inline, if it's the name that you want, or with a pop-up if there are additional fields that you want to fill out. Now you can see here that the related items, the lines, can be added from here as well. Very easy. Let's go. We'll have a lot to cover today, and time is short, so I'm running through that a little bit. Okay, signatures. Very important again for regulated processes. So first of all, both InfoPath and Ultimate Forms have signatures. In InfoPath, it's digital signatures, meaning that you would need a digital certificate, either produced by an internal certificate authority within your organization, or using buying one from someone like VeriSign. In our case, it's an electronic signature, and it's authenticated using your Active Directory credentials, or it can be handwritten using a signature pad as well. In InfoPath, you can only view the signature when you open up the form. In our case, you can view them in forms, in list views, and even when you print it out. Let's just see that real quick. So in InfoPath, the signature is basically here. Click on sign and make some changes, and it's gonna pop up and ask you for your certificate basically. In our case, it's in purchase orders. You can approve your purchase order using a signature. So basically, we already saw that, but I wanna focus on that more. Again, let's make it bigger. So we change our decision, and then we type our username and password. It's signed. You can see the signature both in the form and here. And whenever we change something, one of the values that we signed, it's going to break the signature automatically as well. Okay, printing. Another important thing, although we're all trying to be paperless, we still print a lot. So in InfoPath, you can print. You can print basically what you see on your screen. There's a print button, and you can simply open it up in print preview, exactly the same, and print it out. In Ultimate Forms, you can define multiple different print profiles, print templates. You can even select one automatically. So the printout can look completely different from what you see on your screen, from the list item that you see. If it's an invoice or if it's a purchase order, it can be look the way you want it. You can even do it in like free text format as well. Exporting that printout, you can export, in our case, you can convert it to PDF and email it with attachments. You can even automate the whole process. In InfoPath, when you're using form services, none of that is possible. UI integration in InfoPath, you can only print from the form itself. There's a button there. In our case, you can print from the forms or from any view, and you can even select multiple items and print them together. So let's see. We'll start with InfoPath. Print preview looks exactly the same. Okay. In our case, let's see, first of all, the integration. You can see that we can print from here. We can print from here as well. It's the same. We can select multiple ones and print them. So let's print this one. You can see that the layout is something that we control. So you can see you see the related items here. You see the signature. You see all of the colors and the icons. We can have our own header, our own footer here, and we can even have barcodes. Now we can convert it to PDF. Again, just clicking on the button, and it will create a PDF file that is basically identical to what you see on your screen, together with any images, together with the signatures and the color coding. I haven't done it today, so it's a little bit slow. Okay, here it is. So you can see that it's the same. And you can email directly from here as well. So you can, as a PDF or not. Now what happens when, and this template is called purchase order. So I printed an approved purchase order. What happens if I try to print something that has not been approved? Oh, we're seeing something else. This obviously cannot be sent to the supplier. And this template is called invalid order. So we basically have two templates, and we select one automatically based on the approval status of this purchase order. Very convenient. Next. External data. Want to integrate some data in external databases or web services. So InfoPath lets you do that, but they only support MS SQL as their data source for the data sources. They support web services as well. We support any type of database, Oracle, MySQL, whatever. Both platforms can filter the external data based on the data on your form. We will see that. And in our case, we can also import and export things automatically, such as we can import emails, web services, any types of databases, and export PDF and so on to email. InfoPath does not do that. Well, SharePoint can import emails, but the abilities are not the same. You cannot exactly compare, because in our case, we can support any source of data, and we can map to any type of field, and we can not only create new items, but we can also update existing items and so on. So let's just see about the data sources. Again, with the purchase order, when we create one new one, let's just go here quickly. It's actually the product itself is from a SQL database. So I select media, and it filters the information from the external database, and it brings in the unit price as well. Very convenient. This is very similar. I select media, same database, get the information, and it also gets the price, and then that price is promoted to a column within your list, and it participates in all the calculations with the quantity and everything. Okay. Okay, color coding, another very, very useful capability. In InfoPath, you can control, using, again, rules, you can control the background color, font color, boldness, underline, and so on. there's a list of things that you can control. In our case, we can control the background color, font color, icons, something that InfoPath does not have. InfoPath can display those color codings only within the forms themselves. Again, in our case, we can support forms, views, calendars, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, and the printouts. We actually saw that. So just see that again. All of the places where we see this. So for instance, the project, you saw that the project will color-coded according to the status. The leads and the insurances were had an icon based on the type of insurance, and you see that both in here in the list itself, in the form itself. So it's basically the same all over, and if you print it, and I can even print it from here, I guess, no problem. I don't have a template, but still, you still here as well. You see it as well. Okay, next. Okay, so this is actually the last feature that we're going to be comparing today. I think time is short. In terms of item IDs, you want to assign IDs to your purchase orders that are unique and that are in your exact format. So InfoPath does not support that. We do. We support multiple templates that you can select one according to conditions. Our format supports combination of text, column values, functions, numerators. We can apply them both in new items, and in some cases you would want to apply them when the item is modified. So just to show you, again, within the actually you can see it here. For instance, insurers, HM meaning home, and the date and the numerator in the purchase orders. You can see that it's PO and that then abbreviation of the supplier's name, and again year and numerator. If you go again to design and to item IDs, you will see the template here, really simple to define. So it's PO, then we are looking up a column called code inside the supplier where we store the abbreviation. It's a different column, and then we calculate the year of the date and the numerator. So we have a lot of this special functions and calculations that you can perform in any place where you have conditions. So for instance here, we can apply specific template only when specific conditions apply. So for instance, we can check and compare a column value to other columns or to results of any function. So we have a lot of different functions that you can use here as well. This functionality, this value picker, is present across all the features that we discussed today. Okay. So we covered a lot. It took us almost 45 minutes now to cover all these features, but we did not talk about everything that Ultimate Forms can do. Actions we only just touched. There's a lot more. Again, I told you that we had a special webinar just about the actions. Alerts that replace the built-in alert mechanism as well. Color-coded calendars, charts and graphs, color-coded views, KPIs, and so much more. So let's just show you some of the things really, really quick. So not covered was the calendar that's color-coded with the ability to integrate the associated tasks as well. And it takes information from multiple data sources, such as, for instance, our events that are distinct from our projects. So basically, we can take data from different types of lists or Exchange or whatever. Charts. These are our insurances, right? So we see the pie chart of insurances, and we see the insurances themselves here, so we can actually click on the chart and filter the list of insurances using the chart itself. Very useful as well. And KPIs, we have the ability, this is a budget utilization, so you can see how much of the budget you have actually utilized, and if it's below 80% it's green, between 80 and 100 it's yellow, and red if it's above 100%. Okay, So thank you for joining us. You saw Ultimate Forms, you saw the freedom it gives you to build the forms that you need. You can meet us at SharePoint Fest, New York City, or at the Microsoft Partner Conference in Washington, D.C. as well. You can download Ultimate Forms for a 30-day trial, no obligation, and you will be able to view this recording later on when we make it available, and you can also read the script of this webinar in our blog as well, so you can see everything in a written form. So again, thank you for coming. We're going to be staying on the line for a few more minutes to answer any questions that you might have, and thank you again for coming.